What's up, everybody? Jeremy Weiss here with Weiss Tech Hockey, and I'm really excited to be announcing this, but we are getting ready to release our in-season version of the S3 formula. Now, if you haven't been around for very long, or at least since the summer, the S3 formula is our web-based off-ice strength and conditioning program designed specifically for hockey players. And the S3 stands for speed, strength, and size. Three things that are obviously extremely important to hockey players. The program was originally designed as an off-season strength and conditioning program, and since it's web-based, we had players from literally from all over the world participating together and seeing some incredible improvements over the course of the summer. Now, obviously, strength and conditioning is something that we want to maintain throughout the course of the season, and so that's where our in-season version of the program comes into play. So to kind of kick off the festivities and get you thinking a little bit about your off-ice conditioning, I wanted to talk a little bit about heart rate zone training. Now, you may or may not know this about me already, but I actually recently started working as a personal trainer for Lifetime Fitness. Now, I've been training for a number of years privately prior to this, but one of the reasons I really wanted to work for Lifetime Fitness is because they take an extremely scientific approach to their strength and conditioning programming. So whether we're working with overweight, middle-aged people, or elite athletes, we have tools and programs that are very scientific that we can use to really get the most results in the quickest amount of time possible. So obviously we're hockey players here. We're going to be applying these concepts to hockey training. But what I wanted to do is kind of introduce you to this heart rate zone chart and explain a little bit about how it works and how you might be able to incorporate this into your off-ice strength and conditioning program. So this is our heart rate zone chart. Basically, as you're working out, there are 5 different zones that your heart rate may fall into. The lower zones are zones 1, 2, and 3, and then the two higher zones are zones 4 and 5, obviously. So anytime that you're working out, your body is either using fat for fuel or sugar for fuel. Now, when you're using fat for fuel, it's a very efficient way of generating energy for your body to use while you're working out. The only problem is that it's more effective at the lower intensities. So obviously hockey is a higher intensity sport, so most of the time we're going to be using more sugar for fuel than fat. And we'll talk a little bit about how this applies in a second. So in the lower zones, you're burning more fat than sugar as you're working out. As you start getting more intense, those numbers kind of crisscross until you hit this anaerobic threshold. The anaerobic threshold is the blue line going straight across here. What the anaerobic threshold is that's the last heartbeat for your body at which you're still using some fat for fuel. So after you've passed your anaerobic threshold, you're no longer using fat for fuel, meaning now you're draining your sugar stores exclusively. So what does this mean for hockey? Hockey obviously is a very anaerobic sport. Most of the time you're either sprinting or gliding, and if you're not on the ice, you're resting on the bench during games. So what do we want to do? First and foremost, we want to push our anaerobic threshold up as high as we can. What does that mean for us? That means that as we're working out, as we're exercising during the games, our body it's going longer and longer before it starts, using exclusively muscle sugar for fuel. Meaning we can go longer before we kind of hit that wall where we can't go anymore. So pushing that anaerobic threshold up as high as possible is going to allow us to continue burning fat for fuel at higher levels of intensity. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, obviously, since hockey's, we're on the ice for 45 seconds to a minute and then we're off, we want to make sure that we're recovering as quickly as possible. And we talked a little bit about this in our previous videos on energy systems, but this is kind of taking that to a more exact level, more exact science level. So how do we increase our ability to recover between shifts? What we want to do for that is develop our aerobic base, and that's our zone 2. So we want to improve our aerobic base, and what that's going to do is it's going to support our anaerobic efforts and make us improve our recovery time between shifts. So how do we do this? First and foremost, if you're looking to increase your anaerobic threshold, you're going to want to train in zones 4 and 3. Zones 3 and 4. What that's going to do, the high end of zone 3, the low end or middle of zone 4, that's going to pull your anaerobic threshold up. Okay, and then the same concept happens with zone 2. To increase your aerobic base, you're going to want to train in zones 2 and 3. So what does that mean for us? That means basically we're going to want to do a combination of the 2. So we might have one day where we go exclusively in zone 2 to kind of use that as some base training. Then we might have a day where we go kind of medium intensity, where we're alternating back and forth, kind of almost intervals between zones 2 and 3. Then we might have a hard day where we're going, quite a bit in zones 3 and 4. And what that's going to do is that's going to bump up that anaerobic threshold, and also increase your aerobic base, basically making it so you can go harder for longer and recover quicker between those shifts. So how do we use the zone chart? It's actually fairly simple. The very first thing you're going to do is find your anaerobic threshold. And there are 3 different ways of doing that, and I'll talk about those in a second. But once you establish your anaerobic threshold, all you're going to do is find that number. So let's say that your anaerobic threshold is around 160. Then what you're going to do is you're going to go up and down that column, and that's going to be a good estimate of where your zones might be. So for example, your zone 1 in this example would be 96 beats per minute to 112. Zone 2 would be 112 to 144, 144 to 160. And we've got 160 at your anaerobic threshold, and 160 to 176, 176 to peak. And that's roughly where your zones would fall. So there's a few different ways of establishing this. The first way is basically an equation. And honestly, it works better for older people. Once you get kind of under age 18, it becomes less and less accurate. But the first way is the bronze method, or kind of good, better, best almost. And what that is basically you're going to subtract your age from 180, then subtract 10 if you haven't been exercising recently, which obviously we're all hockey players, we have been. Add 10 if you've been exercising 4 times per week for the past few years. So I would estimate that that's probably most of us hockey players at this phase in our lives. So that's how you would find that out, and then from there, you get a general idea of where it might be, and you can kind of pick your column from there. The next method is a little bit better. It's a silver method, or kind of the good, better. This is the better method. The better method is almost a feeling measurement. So you're going to get on the treadmill, and I'm sure you've all experienced this, where you're going at an intensity where it's okay. You can kind of breathe in and out through your nose just fine without opening your mouth. But then all of a sudden you get to that point where you're no longer able to just go in and out through your nose. You're kind of huffing and puffing through your mouth, like, and that's the point where you've hit that anaerobic threshold. Also, one-word answers. You can't carry a conversation. That's a good sign that you're at that anaerobic threshold. So if you get really good at, at understanding how it feels to be at anaerobic threshold, you can get a good gauge on where that number might be. And then again, pick your column accordingly, and then get a good estimate on where the rest of your zones might be. The best method actually involves a metabolic test. And if you do have a Lifetime Fitness in your area, then you can go in there and you can actually do these tests without being a member of the club. So you'll just go in, ask if you can do it, and they will let you. Obviously, there's a fee involved to do it, but you can make that happen. So what you'll want to do is go into your Lifetime Fitness. Tell them you want to take the Metabolic Assessment Profile Test, which is the MAP test. And basically what you do is it's similar to those Gatorade commercials where you see the guy running on the treadmill with the mask on. We have that same technology at Lifetime Fitness where we can actually have you do that same test, and we get a lot of different information. First and foremost, we get your anaerobic threshold, but then we can also pinpoint your exact zones, and everybody's zones are slightly different. So we can pinpoint exactly where your zone 1 starts and stops. Same thing with zone 2, 3, 4, and 5. And from there, it becomes a lot easier to custom tailor a program to fit your specific needs. So that is heart rate zone training in a nutshell. The only other thing to add to that is once you've got your zones established, you're going to want to pick up a heart rate monitor. And it's great to have this information, but if you don't have a way of monitoring it while you're working out, then obviously it's ineffective. So pick up a good heart rate monitor. The Polar brand heart rate monitors can do a lot of this stuff. The RS300 model and the RS400 model are actually programmable, where once you have your 5 zones established, you can actually program into the heart rate monitor exactly where your zones start and stop. So it's a very easy way of using this chart in your zone training. So enjoy this, make use of it, and keep checking back, because we'll keep you posted on the relaunch of our in-season version of the S3 formula.